nervous laugh going on. Really, really love the Apostle Paul and all of his lists. He's really good at making lists. Have you ever noticed that? He lists all this stuff. He's like, hey, I want you to not do these things and then do all these things. And when you're a teenager and you're trying to figure stuff out in the faith, that was gold for me. I was like, well, this is easy. He's just telling me exactly what to do and what not to do. There we go. That's easy. The Bible says, and therefore, all good, right? Just adopt it, put it on, and we're good to go. That's a little bit more complicated than that, unfortunately. I think so. So we have what's called the dreaded list. A lot of people, when they get out of that teenage phase and they just life is a little bit more complex than it was when I was a teenager. Catch my drift. But I loved Paul's list as a teenager because it made things really easy. So just tell me what's right, tell me what's wrong, and I'm good to go. And it seems like that's what this passage is trying to do. Here's a bunch of stuff you should not do, and here's a bunch of stuff that you should do. But then I got the question, well, why did he pick those ones for this letter, and then in a different letter for, the Corinthians or whatever, he's picking a different list over there, and he's going to change it up for the Romans when he writes Romans. It's a different list there. Why doesn't he just have one universal list? Wouldn't that be easier? If there was just one universal list that we can just compile, and Paul's like, well, here you go. Here's my list. This is what you're supposed to do and not do. I just have one list, and I give it to everybody, and we're good to go. Wouldn't that be a lot easier than changing things up? Well, it would help us understand at least what he was trying to do. Now, if you read these lists as the non-negotiable morals of the Christian life, then you're going to run into some problems. You're going to run into some trouble. This is not a list of non-negotiable morals for Christian conduct. That's not what Paul is attempting to do. He's not trying to do that. But that's how we read that passage often. We look at it, we say, the Bible says, and then we go to Paul's list and we say, well, it's right there. It's right there. The Bible says, the Bible says. But it's a little too easy. That's a little bit too easy to just superimpose the list on top of our life and say, well, there we go. We're done. So what we really like in the earlier stages of faith is we want, help me craft a code of conduct that keeps me in good standing with all the people around me. That's what we're attempting to do. When I was a teenager, I loved the list because I'm like, all I got to do is stay away from that stuff, and all these people over here like me, and they approve of me, and it's all good to go. It's a very clear way to impress people with how good I was. Isn't that great? That's so easy. I can just do the list, and then everybody thinks I'm great. But does that list, and just modifying my behavior to accommodate the list, does that have any kind of ability to get at my personal character and change who I fundamentally am on the inside? And I would say it didn't do that for me. Just obeying the list helped me kind of dodge people and deflect people from doing any hard inquiry into the character of my inner life. Because I had a good face on it, because I'm obeying all the lists that Paul has kind of set out for us. Now, if we're looking at these, given a list of rules, then we say rules are absolute, non-negotiable moral laws, and that's what Paul is attempting to do for everyone for all time. But then we got that tricky question of why doesn't he just have one universal list that he gives to all the churches that he's writing to? And why does he change it for each one? So we have to look then and say there's something specifically that Paul is trying to address in this context, to this letter written to this church 2,000 years ago. And it's not just about communicating non-negotiable rules for Christian conduct. Something else is going on here. And we got to get a little bit philosophical to kind of pull on the hamstrings of what it is. Paul is attempting not to craft non-negotiable religious rules for people to obey. He is instead trying to take a community and shape its ethic. That's a very different thing. And that's what we're going to be kind of diving into. Ethics are what happens when we get together and we agree we don't do certain things and we do certain things because that's going to hold us together. And the people of receiving this letter, they're trying to survive. They're very much oppressed people trying to survive. And anything that would tear the community apart and start to unravel the community apart from one another, that's going to weaken their community. And so ethics are something that a group of people agree to and say, this is how we are going to hold together as a community in the midst of being persecuted and martyred and oppressed. So this is very different, isn't it? When you look at it that way. Now remember, Paul is writing this letter not just to a church that, let me tell you how to be very good Christians. He is instead writing this to a certain group of people, the Colossian people. They are under an oppressive rule of the Roman Empire's government. Their whole system, they're oppressing them, and this Roman Empire has the ability to shape their imagination, and when they shape their imagination, then it can shape how they behave, and then how they behave, it's like Paul is writing and saying, I'm going to give you a different vision for how the world works. I'm going to show you a little bit, peek underneath the cover of what's actually going on, and I want to help you then form an ethic that holds your community together in the midst of something that's really difficult. So morals and ethics is really fun conversation to have. Morals are this, imposed laws from the outside, social codes that you're supposed to adopt, behavior control, and power preservation. Now this isn't bad. These are I'm just observing what they are. These aren't bad. Like the moral code that says you should not murder other people, I kind of like that one. That's a good one, right? If that was not something that is imposed over people, things could get really messy really quick. So morals aren't bad things. But what morals are meant to do is they're laws that are imposed on the people, a social code that says this is how you remain in good standing with us, and it controls the behavior. Now you're not going to go out and kill people because there's certain consequences for that. And it preserves that power structure in place that gets to craft the rule that says don't kill people. So it's not a bad thing. Just saying that's not what Paul's trying to do. He's doing something else. He's crafting an ethic. What's an ethic? It's something totally different. Ethics are an alternative vision for how the world works. It questions the motivation of the individual at hand. That's what the gospel is trying to get at, is our inner character. Not just modify your behavior, but to get at your character and instill virtue inside of your character. It maintains community and it prioritizes compassion. These are what ethics do. And this is what Paul is attempting to do here. Not hand out religious rules and impose laws and say, if you want to be a good Christian in good standing, this is what you do. We're going to control your behavior, and it's going to preserve the church power that then gets to... He's not doing that. He's doing something else entirely. He's doing ethics. He's saying there's a different way to live your life. And instead of saying, hey, you probably shouldn't kill people, the gospel is going to take it 3 steps ahead and say, why don't you address the hatred in your heart that could grow into violent acts? Well, that's totally different. A law can't get at that. The law still allows you to be a hateful person. You just can't do something with that hate. But ethics will get at that driving character flaw inside of us that says, I want to hate an individual. And he says, Jesus actually said that, if you've ever said to somebody, you idiot, then you're guilty of murder. He's taking it that step where he's trying to get to the heart and trying to get at the ethic that is there, that instills character and virtue. He's saying, don't just not do these things because they're bad. He's saying, become the kind of person that desires these things over here. That's very different than than how we normally read this passage. So Paul is not attempting to hand out a list of rules that good Christians will do, and bad Christians don't do them very well. Instead, he's crafting a community ethic for the Colossian people under the oppression of the Roman government, and saying this is how you can hold your community together in the midst of all of the pressures from the outside that you're experiencing. And so that's what he's doing with this letter to the Colossians. It's kind of like Colossians 3 is not morals handed out to you that you're supposed to obey, but this is a resurrection ethic. They believe in a resurrected Christ, a resurrected Lord. This section is how to live a resurrection ethic in the midst of an empire that demands that you conform and sacrifice to it. You can bring along your religion too, that's cool. But first and foremost, we demand that you conform and sacrifice to us first, and then tag along your religion on the back end, and that's okay. And Christ does something entirely different. And Paul is writing about this ethic. He says, this is how you maintain community amongst you. Now, an empire, we talked about this last week. The Bible is mostly like community versus empire. Like all the way back from Adam and Eve, like their first kids, like one of them killed each other. Remember the whole story of Cain and Abel? And Cain is like, oh, like you got to get out of the garden. What's the first thing he does is he builds a city. City's empire. Abraham is called out of empire. Moses is called out of empire. And even the Israelites, when they finally get into their land, they're like, you know what? I want a king. And God was like, that's a bad idea, guys. That's a bad idea. Because kings will take all your stuff. That's what he just says. So an empire is when a group of people organize themselves around rules, structures, stories, economies, and hierarchies. That's what happens. We naturally do it, and we kind of have to do it in order to remain organized as human beings. So they're not necessarily bad. Religions can do this, denominations can do it, corporations can do it, governments do it, media outlets do it. There's all these empires all over the world. It's wherever humans organize themselves around rules, structures, stories, economies, and hierarchies. That's what an empire is. They're not bad in and of themselves. When it crosses the line from a just to an unjust society, that's when the kingdom of God steps in and says, that's not what we are about. Because when we naturally organize ourselves, there's a broader base at the bottom, and there's a thinner base at the top. And all of the resources then get funneled to the top. That's how, like a CEO gets more than a hire, right? Just how it normally works. And that's probably fine that a CEO gets paid more than initial hiring. But when you look at Coca-Cola, and the CEO makes 3,332% more than the average salary of the entire corporation put together, you're like, well, I think that probably crosses a line somewhere into unjust. That's probably somewhere. I don't know where that line is. Like, are we going to label a number? I don't know what it is. But there tends to be empires that humans build tend to funnel things up to the CEO, up to the boss, up to the whoever is at the top. And when Jesus shows up, he says, whatever you do for the least of these, he's like, I'm representing the kingdom of God, the empire of God. And he says, we're going to flip it on its head. And instead of funneling everything up to the top, we're going to funnel the resources down to the people that need it the most. He says, that's what the kingdom of God is like. The human empires organize themselves naturally in these ways. He says, we're flipping it around on its head, and we're going to do it differently. So when a structure, when an empire flips or somehow crosses some line, and again, there's not like a number that's given in the Bible, that is now the person at the top receives far more resources that then affects the quality of life of all those down at the bottom. It crosses a line into an unjust. Not illegal, it's just unjust, right? It's unjust that way. It's empires, they don't need a throne in order to maintain this either. They just need your loyalty, your imagination, and your fear. And Colossians, the book of Colossians, is giving this community that's underneath the Roman Empire an alternative vision than the dominant one that they have been given. So that's kind of what Paul is attempting to do here. It gives a little bit more light. So let's dive in here. He says, if you have been raised with Christ, seek the things that are above, where Christ is seated at the right hand of God. Set your minds on the things that are above, not on the things that are on earth. Now, a few things about this verse. This is interesting. Like, Paul is not telling them, well, don't be concerned about all this earthly stuff, because you're going to be living in heaven one day, and it's a totally different plane of existence. And what you got to do is you got to try and imagine what it's like to be a spiritual being, and then just kind of adopt all these otherworldly alien things onto your life here in the present day. He's not trying to do that. He's given an entire vision altogether. He's telling them how to be a community in the midst of an oppressive Roman Empire. And he's saying, don't let the empire capture your imagination with its stories and its narratives. That's what he's trying to tell them. All good citizens make tribute to Caesar as Lord, and bad citizens, they don't, and they're punished for it. That's kind of what they said. So imagine, if you will, you're a sandal maker in Colossae, and you have converted over to Christianity, and you're going to this small house church led by Nympha, and she reads Paul's letter to you. And now you're like, okay, well, I guess that this big parade that's coming up in Caesar's honor, where I have to burn incense and declare Caesar as Son of God and Lord of Lords and King of Kings, I guess I probably shouldn't do that. And they're like, yeah, because we know who really is the Son of God and the Lord of Lords and the King of Kings, right? That's Christ. But Caesar had those days co-opted for himself. Jesus comes and says, I'm going to take those titles away from Caesar. Now, when you are in a guild of other small tradesmen, and they're like, our whole guild's going to do this. It's like a union. Like, we all got to do this thing. And it's for the better of all of us, and we just have to, pay a little homage and do a little worship with some incense for Caesar and call him King of Kings and Lord of Lords and Son of God. And it'll be all right. And we'll all have better businesses because of it. And now you are like, but I don't think he is the Son of God and Lord of Lords and King of Kings. I think Jesus is that. And now you've got a moral dilemma, right? Like, what do I do? What does my community ethic demand of me? What does my community ethic tell me is the right thing to do? You say, I'm not going to march in the parade and offer incense up to Caesar. So now what does it do to your business? Now the guild is like, yeah, he didn't do the thing. So let's not bring him in anymore. We're going to excommunicate him from the guild. Okay, well that's going to be hard for me financially because that's where I got the majority of my business, right? So you can see how the empire says, do this, demand this, participate in this, or else, right? The or else is what gets you. And what is the punishment? What is the punishment? What is the or else? Well, it's crucifixion. That's how the Roman government did stuff. Crucifixion was like, boom. Paul is telling them here, you have been raised with Christ. Seek the things that are above where Christ is seated at the right hand of God. Now that was a reference to Caesar's throne and saying, actually it's not him, it's Jesus. For you have died. He's like, you already died. So there's the main weapon that this empire of Rome can use against you. Do this or else you die. And Paul's like, you're already dead. Remember your baptism? You were buried with Christ and raised again to walk in newness of life. Like, you've already experienced death. Death is the weapon of the empire. And he's saying Christ disarmed that. And your life is not in the hands of the emperor that could kill you, but in God's hands who will redeem you with justice even past death. Now that's a different thing. So you can see how this phrase here is not just trying to communicate spiritual following, fun things like, oh, your real life is hidden with Christ in God. Like, that is a phrase that says Caesar can't get to that. He can't touch you. He can't rob you of your real life, and he can't even kill your soul. Like, he might put the body to death, but God is there on the other side. He's saying that there, Christ has disarmed the rulers and the power, that's what we talked about last week, and put them on display for what they are. And he's talking about the Caesar and the governors and all that of the Roman Empire, specifically. So he then says, your life is hidden with Christ in God. That means that Caesar can't get to it, can't rob it. It's a place that's far above his throne. That's treasonous language right there. And he can't get to it. And that there is glory. Somehow that is a glory. And man, Caesar loved glory. He loved his parades. He loved his military. He loved walking around. Sometimes he would even tell people who are making statues, make me, he looked like Danny DeVito, but he's like, make me look like Jason Momoa. Like, I want to be taller than I am. I don't want a six-pack. And they're like, okay, you're the emperor. I guess you're allowed to do that. And so there's all of these, but he really did look like Danny DeVito. Not that he's ugly or anything. He just, no Momoa. Okay. So, Father Richard Rohr, one of my favorites, he said this: the spiritual journey is not about acquiring something outside of yourself, but letting go of what is false within. So Paul here is empowering the people with their own humanity, in their own community, and saying this empire does not own you, cannot destroy your soul, cannot tell you who you are, and cannot give you value. That is not something. You already have all the value of a human being within you. The empire cannot dish it out to you. It cannot give you all these bonuses and rewards and paychecks and recognitions and trophies and degrees and all these things that empires can give you, and it's great to get recognition and pursue things and get certificates, but that doesn't make you a more valuable human being. You already have the value as a human being. And the other things are kind of cool, and they're fun, and they're great, and you can get those things, and there's nothing wrong with them. But the empire that hands those things out does not give you more value as a human being because you did something wrong. He's saying that you need to take back the authority out of the hands of the empire of finding your value and put it back into the hands of God. Because it's not something outside of yourself you're looking for. It's already within you. You got to let go of all the lies you believe that says, no, that person out there is the one that's able to tell me I'm worth something, and tell me that I'm good, and tell me that I'm useful, and tell me that, and it's not that. Now here, the one you admire shapes your ethic. This is what he's trying to do. He's putting on display the two different glories. The glory of Caesar, which is about power and might and strength and authority and positions and riches and all this other stuff. And then there's the glory of God, which is revealed in the crucifixion of Christ, which is all about self-sacrifice and humility and kindness and compassion and justice. And whoever controls the story that you believe in your mind is of glory, they're the ones that controls how you behave. There's the thing, we do not have beliefs. There's nothing in our brain, a list of things that we say, yeah, we believe these things. We can mentally say, yes, I agree with these things, but those aren't necessarily what we believe. We believe stories. We are people that love stories. You love going to the movies. You love reading a great novel, right? You love stories. We're not people that say, give me a list of things that I'm supposed to believe, and then I will adopt those, and then therefore I believe those things. That's impossible, because we crave stories. And the one who controls the stories is the one that gets to direct your behavior. And rules are just something that says, do this and don't do this and don't question it. But ethics are asking of you, who are you and how shall you live in relation to that? That's totally different. Paul's not handing out a list of rules. He's giving them a community ethic. He's saying this is about who you are, about who Christ has made you to be. How are you then going to live in relation to that? So the next phrase here, put to death, therefore, whatever in you that is earthly. He has this whole list of sexual immorality, impurity, passion, evil desire, and the one we all like to ignore, greed, which is idolatry. On account of these, the wrath of God is coming on those who are disobedient. Boy, this sounds like a good fundamentalist preacher finger wag, doesn't it? But it's not. It isn't. He's trying to help them craft an ethic, a community that is not giving them a non-negotiable moral list that they're supposed to adopt. He's crafting a community ethic that's opposed to the empire vision of the world. Religious finger-wagging is just baptized empire rule. Enforcement absent of community ethics. That's all that is. Paul here is giving a relational ethic. Avoid the things that tear you apart. Cultivate the things that help you flourish. And Paul concludes a list of things that could be defined as sexual ethic with one economic phrase. Holy smokes. Why is that one in there? He's giving a list. Isn't it? Like, that's a list. Like sexual immorality, impurity, passion, evil desire, greed? Like what? I thought he was given a sexual ethic here. But he's not merely just doing that. Because he knows that if you are like the most sexually chaste individual but still have insatiable greed for more, then you're in the same family as these other things. You're like, they're all the same thing. Paul is not saying don't. He's raising up something called fidelity in love. In an empire that demands people are commodities. For who? For the emperor. And he's saying that's not true. He's calling them to fidelity and love because that's going to be the community glue. And anything that's going to break up the fidelity and love of a community, he's like, got to get rid of that stuff. And greed makes the list. And he even adds some commentary on that. He's like, well, greed is actually just idolatry. So this is the great flip right here. He uses this phrase, the wrath of God on the disobedient. Who's that? All those irreligious people? No, actually not. The wrath of God is supposed to be contrasted with the wrath of Caesar. Because if you make Caesar mad, what happens? You're crucified. You're dead. You're gone. Unless you happen to be a Roman citizen, then you're in prison. So he's taking authority out of the hands of the empire and the Caesar and giving it to God. He's like, actually, no. This transfers all the language of power from Rome back to God. This is like an absolute treasonous phrase here to say all this stuff. The empire virtues are this: anger, wrath, malice, slander, and abusive language. Those are the virtues within the empire of Rome. Those are the things that are good, right? Think about, you see something, maybe you encounter something, whether it's on Facebook or the news or just in public, and you're like, that's wrong. Whatever rises up within you and says, I hope this happens, that's what you believe and have faith in to make the world right. Is it violence? Is it retribution? Is it revenge? Do you have faith in those things? That's the thing that humans have the most faith in. Those are all fed by the empire values of anger and wrath and malice and slander and abusive language. Those are the things that Christ encountered in his crucifixion. Saying those are virtues to that empire system, but not so among you. And then he gives them an entirely different list in the next plane. Because he's not giving them lists of things you don't do and rules and nothing. He's crafting the community ethic that transfers authority from Rome and Caesar and all that back into their own humanity and the God they worship. So this is something that is like very profound for the Colossians to experience. Because they're just like, they live within the waters of the Roman Empire and they don't know anything else. They're the ones who dish out blessings and curses. And if you do it all right, you get the blessings. If you do it all wrong, you get the curses. I like what Reverend Dr. James Cone said. He said, any theology that is indifferent to the theme of liberation is not Christian theology. Paul's empowering a group of minorities within an empire system with survival tactics, all geared towards reclaiming their dignity that was stolen by the empire, instilling vital community of those exiled by the empire, and then he weaves interdependence of that community together in love, and all to experience liberation from the oppressive forces of the empire that they're in. That's what Paul is attempting to do with his list in Colossians. So then he goes on, he says, do not lie to one another, seeing that you have stripped off the old self with its practices and clothed yourself with new self, which is being renewed in the knowledge according to the image of its creator. In that renewal, there is no longer Greek and Jew, circumcised and uncircumcised, barbarian, Scythian, enslaved and free, but Christ is all and in all. Now he takes on lying here, but it's not merely speaking false facts, but any inauthenticity displayed. It's about being open and honest about your expectations and who you are. And that there is a community glue that's stronger than false narratives that says this is who we are, don't question it, and just step in line and just go. This is why the sexual scandals of the Catholic and evangelical churches were covered up for so long, because we can't let that narrative get out. It's going to ruin everything. Right? That was inauthenticity being displayed for so long. Because empires have to control the story. They have to maintain the image. They have to protect the powers. That's all about the empire. And Paul is reminding them that you are not the image you protect. You are the image of God, the one who created the entire universe. And community that he's trying to craft, this is a diversity that is unified in love, not dominating uniformity. Not everyone has to look and speak and act and do and believe all the same way. He gets into things like Greek and Jew, circumcised and uncircumcised, barbarian and Scythian, enslaved and free. In a system that has a class system that is solid and keeps everything running as it should, Paul saying that phrase, man, he's like, that is not community. He's like, everybody comes into the church and they have equal say. And if you're a slave on the outside, when you step into the doors of the church, you're no longer a slave. And you can actually serve communion to somebody who might be high up in a government position. And they come into the church and they don't have that position inside of the church. They're just another human being like you are. That was something that was absolutely radical. And the Roman Empire saw that as a threat. Because that was a love that crossed over all the differences and divides that tear us apart. All the social barriers and the banners that we gather under to wage war against the other people out there. He's saying, that's not what I want of you. I like what Howard Thurman said. He says, the community of God's people is richer because it contains those who are different. So this here, whoever you believe is not invited, is the very person you must learn to love. That's what Paul is letting them know. You can't have these distinctions and hierarchies and all this stuff within your communities because that tears you apart. That's what the empire is built on. That's the thing that oppresses you. Don't let it take root inside of your community that's based on love and unity. And so I like what Mary Oliver says. She says the first act of love is always the giving of attention. Christians were known as the folks who would give attention to those who were in need. Because they said, we're going to clothe ourselves in love. Now, when you put on clothes, like you have a style, right? You put on a style and you're like, all right, I'm going to wear the red shirt today. I got a new hat. It's pretty cool. I showed it off to Don earlier. I'm like, check out my new leather hat, made in Australia. I think they killed 4 spiders to get it. Right? Like, it's cool. I have a style. You have a style. When you clothe yourself, you're putting your style on display. And Paul is saying, and no one can deny it. Everyone's like, that's a style. Like, they have this style for them and they do this. Paul is saying, do the same thing with love. Like, when people look at you, they see your style and who you are and how you present yourself to the world. Paul is saying, do that with love. You can have your own style of how you love other people, but clothe yourself in it. So it's the first thing people encounter when they meet you. It's like, that's a very loving, kind person. That's a person who's not trying to defend themselves all the time. That's a person who's humble. That's a person who is looking out for those who are not just in their own camp. That's a person who seems like they love people. That's a person who maybe looks and acts and thinks like Christ. That would be good for Christians to do that, right? That would be wonderful. Clothe yourselves in love. It's not just, do loving things. He's saying, no, like, make it your whole presentation of who you are to the world. That's what you ought to be doing. That's how Christians, and he's saying these ethics that I'm trying to give this community in Colossae, this is how you survive in, like, love is the thing that's going to bind you all together. Love is the thing that's going to hold you all together. And as soon as you start fighting and bickering, and that's the one thing that Paul was like, we can't have that. Because you already got enough problems. You're in this Roman oppressive empire thing is crushing you all. This should be the place where you don't experience that crushing, oppressive, exclusive force. This should be the place that brings you all together in love and in unity. And there are no distinctions between class and education and all that doesn't exist here. This is the place where you can have a reprieve from the empire, not experience just a religious one that's clothed and baptized. So here's a couple of things for you to question this week, some reflection questions for you to think about. Where are you letting empire dictate your identity? What are the stories that you hear that you believe and cling to and says, yes, 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 that will make the world right? Is that specifically a resurrection ethic, or is it empire? Another one. Which of your rules are absent of an ethic? Which of the rules are you like, everyone around me needs to be obedient to these things? Which of them comes from a loving glue that holds community together? And which of it is, no, just people need to conform because this is how it ought to be? And how can you expand your compassion today? How can you expand your compassion? And then here's a spiritual practice for you to try. Who needs your attention today? If love is paying attention, who needs your attention today? Be on the lookout this week, or even today, of who needs your attention. Our benediction today is Psalm 107, retold by modern-day poet Malcolm Guite. I will read that while our musicians come forward. My judge is still my Savior and my friend. Time after time he finds and rescues me, makes a beginning where I've made an end. I was astray, and yet he came to me and filled my hungry soul with nourishment. I sat in darkness, bound in misery, crushed by depression and discouragement. He brought me out of darkness, broke the chain, the complex link of my imprisonment. When I was sick and wearied in pain, afraid of pestilence in these dark days, he sent his word and raised me up again. So I will sing this psalm that sings his praise, telling of all the wonders he has done, whose loving kindness keeps me all my days. That is Psalm 107, retold by Malcolm.